Vegas knows how to celebrate. If you're headed to Vegas for your birthday, plan ahead to get all the birthday freebies the city has to offer. Just by showing your ID, you could get free cash play, scratch cards, drinks, and food at various venues on the Strip. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
It should be illegal for Scottie Scheffler to play on the PGA Tour. This guy can't be stopped. Another victory at the BMW Championship. He has a chip on the 17th, which will go down in the history books. 82 feet, landed 60 feet short, and then rolled the rest of the way. Super exciting win again for Scheffler, who is not only the best golfer in the world, he's becoming one of the best golfers of all time.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid.
Passing offense is him, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. They have Jahan Dotson. They just recently traded for John Mechie from the Houston Texans. And obviously, yes, Saquon is there, but a lot of people are expecting the Eagles to have an increase in their passing rate this year. They won't rely as heavily on Saquon, and it should just mean more volume overall. Obviously, Brown was fantastic, and he did so in not playing a full season last year.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
The Giants are probably going to open up 1-5 on the season. So then you start to say the fans are getting angry. They just want to see Dart. The ownership's like, hey, you know what? Maybe we make the right move with Russ here. But then you have self-preservation mode with the general manager and the head coach, where it almost seems like it's inevitable. Midway through the season, it's going to have to be Jackson Dart. Otherwise, what are we doing, Giants?
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome to the Bowden Blitz ACC edition. I'm Joe Lisi, joined by former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bowden. Coach, the calm before the storm. Games this coming Saturday, week 0 kicks off in the conference, along with games next Thursday and Friday night. But give me your thoughts about where the ACC stands against the Power 4 conferences.
Well, I mean, I think it's a distant third. I mean, whether you're talking Big 12 or talking ACC, I still think there's 1A and 1B. I mean, Big 10, SEC, number of national championships, number of teams in the NFL draft, number of teams, the strength of teams from top to bottom. ACC is doing a great job. Clemson is back in national championship contender. They're right back where they were. We'll see if they go very far, but they have a national championship caliber team, and everybody else is a little bit below that.
Yeah, you see Clemson in the AP top 25, ranked right there, number 4 overall, 12-1 odds to potentially win a national championship. Cade Klubnik, Dabo Swinney looking to get back to an ACC championship. They faced off against SMU, won that matchup, and lost in the semifinal first round against the Texas Longhorns. You have 3 teams in the AP top 25, Clemson at number 4. You have Miami at number 10, and then SMU at 16th overall. Is it possible that we could see some other teams like Louisville or potentially Pittsburgh crack the top 25 by the end of the season?
Yeah, I think Louisville. I still like Georgia Tech, but you can't. Pittsburgh has good people, but I think you've got your basically. Miami does not play Clemson during the season. I would think those two are going to be in the top, but then you've got SMU and you've got Louisville with a new quarterback, but a quarterback coach for a head coach who does a great job with quarterbacks. And then Georgia Tech finished so strong last year, beating Miami and then coming to 8 overtimes with Georgia. They're coming off a positive high note at the end. And so I think all those teams, and you got dark horse. You got Florida State. Who knows? Maybe they can flip it again. You got UNC North Carolina with a coach that's got everybody excited. So I do think there's some dark horse people, but in the ranking of the conference, there's Clemson, then there's Miami, and then there's 2 more, SMU, Louisville, and then there's kind of everybody else.
Yeah, you mentioned Clemson right now, the dominant team, 4th overall. We talked earlier in the podcast about how dominant Dabo Swinney has been, 180 and 47 overall. That's a 793 winning percentage. We talk about the dominance at home for Clemson dating back to 2015, 70 and 5 overall. That's a 933 winning percentage over the past decade. That's just dominant. And when you look at Clemson as a whole, they were 8-1 in the ACC last year, Coach. They won those games by an average margin of victory in the conference of 16.8 points per game. In order for this team to step up and potentially challenge not just for an ACC championship, but more importantly, a national championship, that defense needs to get better this season.
Yeah, they do, and I think they are better. They've got the most productive people coming back, more starters with more talent coming back than almost anybody in the country. So they're projected defensively to be even better, much better. They hired Tom Allen from Penn State, the defensive coordinator, and coordinators do make a difference. Just like in chess, some people can move the pieces around better than others, put people in a place to be successful. He does a great job of doing that. So I think really defensively they're going to be better. The question is, with Phil Maffa gone, can they have a running tack to take all the load off of Cade Klubnik?
Yeah, when you talk about Clemson in the conference, 78-9 overall, dating back to 2015. They've been a dominant team. They got back to an ACC championship last year, battled back against SMU and really dominated that matchup early and often, and that's why they made the college football playoff. Another team that has high expectations almost each and every year are the Miami Hurricanes, Coach. Every year, this is going to be the Hurricanes' shot to potentially win an ACC championship, get back to the college football playoff. They were there with Cam Ward, lost down the stretch to Georgia Tech, and more importantly, Syracuse. Cam Ward is gone, but Carson Beck is now the guy. Can Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes get back to national prominence this season?
Well, Mario Cristobal understands that you got to have a quarterback that can take you to the top. I don't think that has to be the best quarterback in the country. I think it has to be a great leader. Look at what Georgia did in their national championship years. You got to have a quarterback. Carson Beck's got enough stuff. He's had a lot of success. He's played much tougher competition while in the SEC. He'll be a battle-tested veteran quarterback in a program where they have said, we're going to take whatever it takes. We're going to spend an NIL. We're going to bring in athletes. And yes, they lost a lot of talent. But, man, they brought some great people in.
Coach, they only have 2 double-digit winning seasons dating back to 2003. It came in 2017 with Mark Richt. They were a 10-3 overall team. And then last year, 10-3 overall. But I mentioned the 2 losses down the stretch. They got abused offensively by Georgia Tech, and more importantly, Syracuse in that matchup. The defense fell apart. We need a better effort. I agree with you that defense hasn't played well over the past 3 or 4 seasons. They're not the Ed Reed, Jonathan Vilma type of teams, and even the boosters and supporters always think that Miami is a prominent elite program. It's a long way off from the days of Jimmy Johnson, Larry Coker, and Butch Davis, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. But if you think back, the thing that Miami has quit doing is playing great defense. Back in those days, they always had a great quarterback. Kozar, so many Testaverde. You can go back, all the great quarterbacks, but they had Ray Lewis. They had incredible defensive talent, and that's what made them great. And if you look at championship programs and championship teams, it's usually the head coach that understands you start by having a great defense. You know, Lincoln Riley has had a great production on offense, but he could never win the national championship. I don't think you can just be a scoring offense, and when you get to the national championship level of playoff, you're playing great opponents with great talent. You've got to be able to be balanced, run the football, and play defense. Miami has got to play better defense this year. They went out and got a new coordinator. I think they've got to understand that. And if they go, and I think they will go to the conference championship because, again, they don't play Clemson during the regular season. I think they're loaded in talent. But are they going to get back to where they were? That's got to come over a few more than 1 year, I promise you.
And it starts week number 1 against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The game is in South Beach. Carson Beck steps up, transferring from Georgia. Can he be the quarterback that he was a couple of years ago in leading the Georgia Bulldogs to an SEC championship? We'll see. We'll break down that game a little bit later next week as we inch closer to week number 1. You mentioned Louisville, and I find it interesting, Coach, about Jeff Brom. This is a team that challenged Florida State a couple of years ago in the ACC championship. He goes back to his alma mater, but this team has done it running the football and defensively. They're plus 850 to win a championship in the conference. Can they make some noise this year?
Miller Moss has come over from Southern Cal at the quarterback position. And again, Jeff Brom is a genius with quarterbacks. He was a quarterback at Louisville. He always seems to get that quarterback. Maybe nobody knows about him or they haven't had a great year so far. He will make them a great quarterback. But I believe that's why Louisville will be close to the hunt, be in the hunt for the ACC championship by the end of the year.
That was a team that rushed for 185 rushing yards per game. Starting running back Isaac Brown does return, 11 rushing touchdowns, average well over 5 yards per carry. And I mentioned the defense for Louisville. Very physical at the point of contact, especially in the rush defense, rushing attack. They only allowed 132 rushing yards per game, only gave up 230 in the back end. They can be a dark horse within the conference at plus 850 this coming season. When Coach and I return, we have big games on tap. Week number 0, Stanford, Hawaii. We also have Georgia Tech going on the road to face off against the Colorado Buffaloes and their head coach, Deion Sanders, coming right back on the Bowden Blitz.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
It doesn't matter that they're early in the game, late in the game, they're trailing, they're leading. It doesn't matter garbage time. CeeDee Lamb is the guy, and we saw that even after Dak got hurt last year and Cooper Rush was under center. Targets were going to CeeDee Lamb. And when you can get 9, 10, 12, 15 targets on a game-by-game basis, he's going to rack up fantasy points every single week. Frankly, he underperformed last year.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Answer is this. 12-team, 3 wide receiver, you take Jamar Chase. In a 10-team league, though, where you have only 2 wide receivers to start, it's an interesting supply and demand situation with a roster like that. That is where the Bijan number 1 overall maybe comes into play, because you could take Bijan and then turn around. You're still getting 2 number 1 wide receivers in a 10-team league draft.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
In extras, knocked out the Reds 6-5. This team doesn't lose. And the only thing I want to say, Tom, is I just hope they can continue this. Now, what does that mean? 40 games in a row? Of course we know it's not going to be the case. They are peaking right now. We've seen so many times. Baseball's a long season. Boy, if the Brewers are playing this baseball on September the 28th, watch out. But they are sensational right now.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
Back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Coach Bowden breaking down week 0 in the ACC. There's nothing better than a game in Hawaii. Stanford travels to Hawaii this coming Saturday, 7:30 kick. Coach, Hawaii, a 2.5-point home underdog. We see the total set at 50.5. Can Stanford step up with their new interim head coach, Frank Reich, and win this matchup?
Well, I think the fact that they do have a new head coach, and they have a new head coach from the NFL that brings in that experience and that excitement. The players look to him as someone that he knows more. He comes from the NFL. He knows what it takes to be successful. Sometimes that puts the excitement in the players and it brings them to another level. That's what they're counting on. I mean, they brought in Andrew Luck to be their GM, and so they've got that NFL atmosphere that I think is so very attractive to players out on the West Coast for Stanford. And they've been 3-9 4 years in a row. They've been in a funk now, and I think it's a time for Stanford to make that move, because like Duke, maybe Vanderbilt, they have to kind of do things just right to be successful in the ACC or at the Power 5 level.
I agree with you. Now, this matchup played out a couple of years ago with Troy Taylor making his first head coaching start for the Cardinal. They won that matchup on the road as a double-digit favorite. They did win in the fourth quarter, stepped up and really kept Schrager and that offense in check from a defensive perspective. But you look at Stanford, they were 1-5 on the road last year. How important is it to pick up a road win to start your season? And is there something from a coaching perspective that you have to do a little bit differently now with Frank Reich at the helm to win games on the road in college?
Well, being a new head coach and taking over a losing program, a program that's been losing, this game is really critical for the players to buy in immediately to where he wants to go with this program, to the things that he wants to do with the program. If they could get a win on the road, underdog against Hawaii, and get a win, you're talking about great buy-in. You're talking about things that began to make things happen down the road with his football team. So this is a big, big game. It's not the answer to his season or the answer to his career, but if you want to jumpstart the success for that program, this is a big, big game to get the confidence of those players.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think when we look at this matchup on the flip side for Hawaii with their head coach, Timmy Chang, a former player, he was extended in the offseason to 2026. He does have a redshirt freshman quarterback, Micah Alejado, starting. He's a lefty. He can fling it, I'll say that. And that's got to be the matchup if you're Hawaii, because they had one of the worst rushing offenses in all of college football last year, only averaging 97 rushing yards per game. And the weakness for Stanford was in the secondary, the back end. They allowed 280 passing yards per game and 66% completion percentage. So from an offensive perspective, you got to believe that Hawaii is going to attack Stanford over the top.
Well, they will. Now, I think any team that averages so little in rushing, they're going to try to improve their rushing just so they don't always throw it on 3rd and long or throw it when the defense knows you're going to throw it. Hawaii, though, their tradition, their history is throwing the football. So sometimes their running stat is not so much because they can't run, is they don't want to run. They're impatient. They want to play that Hawaii style of offense. But I guarantee you it'll start with Stanford going out there and making sure what little bit they try, they've got to shut down that run to make sure at least the defensive secondary has a chance to be out there with long yardage situations where they can play pretty comfortable and not have to worry about underneath things like that.
And you look at Hawaii last year, they were a 4-3 home team. 3 of the losses, though, 2 of them came very close. 3 points to UCLA to start the year. They lost that matchup 16-13. They lost to UNLV later in the year by 2 points and lost to Boise State by 21. So they lost their 3 home games by an average margin of defeat of 8.6 points per game. So if they get that type of effort, they should be in this matchup. When you look at Stanford as well, Ben Gulbranson, the former quarterback at Oregon State, gets the start, coach. It's now a new scheme with Frank Reich. What can Reich do to get Gulbranson into a little bit of a rhythm early on going up against Hawaii's defense?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you want to help a quarterback out who's in a new system, run the ball some. Make sure it's not pass every single down where the pressure is all on the quarterback. Let him mix that run in and get in the game comfortably. That's what you would like to happen. What you don't want to happen is to play too conservatively and get behind Hawaii where you have to go out there and throw it every down. So the main thing is if the coach can get some balance on offense, not put all the pressure on that quarterback, I think you'll see him having a better chance to get better towards the second half and throughout the season.
We'll see how this game plays out. I will say this, I think it's points aplenty. I mentioned the secondary for Stanford being attacked. Every time they allowed over 300 yards passing. They were 1-3 last year and lost those games by an average margin of defeat of 13.3 points per game. I'll take Hawaii laying the 2.5 points, Coach, and I'm going over the total. How do you see it playing out?
Well, you know what I mean? I'm going to go with Stanford just because of the unknown. But I'm going to say this. The hardest games to bet on are the first game of the season. What's going to be how the team takes the new coach. So many unknowns coming in that it's hard to see how they're going to react to a new coach. They could go one way or the other, but I think they're going to go with the new coach. I think they're going to believe in him. I think you're going to see a great start by Stanford and the start of a new era at Stanford University.
The other game takes place later in the week. It's Georgia Tech in Colorado. You look at Georgia Tech right now across multiple books, Coach, 3.5-point road favorites against Deion Sanders' new quarterback, Caden Salter, early on. How do you see this game playing out?
Well, I tell you, Georgia Tech, if they continue like they finished up last season, they were on fire. I mean, they play, like I say, beat Miami, Georgia to 8 overtimes, a lot of confidence. They have a toughness about their team because of their head coach and the toughness that he brought to the team. And I think they are in an upward trend with their program going into this season. Colorado breaking in a new quarterback. Deion's had to go through some personal health issues. I know he's excited. But you know what? Colorado probably runs worse than anybody out there. They don't give a flip about, 60 yards a game rushing or 60-something, not enough rushing attack. I just think Georgia Tech's going to go out there and take it to them.
To Coach's point, Colorado averaged 65 rushing yards per game, only 2.4 yards per carry. We'll dive back into this game after break. Keep it where it is.
Playing online blackjack and want to try upping your odds? Well, here's a tip. Cheat cards tell you statistics for whether you hit or stand on every move. If you're into stats, this could be your ticket to winning. And it is totally legal. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
The Bengals are listening to trade offers for perennial Pro Bowler Trey Hendrickson per me and Tom Pelissero. It's unclear if the NFL sack leader will be playing elsewhere in 2025, and a trade will be a real challenge, but time will tell. You know it's not a real challenge? In the offseason, when he doesn't want to be here and you're trying to make a trade for him. Most people that say, okay, I have to sell a house or sell a car, let me put it out on the market, and I'll take the best deal that's available.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid. This is the moment every fan waits for. The countdown's over. The road to kickoff has begun.
Play is here to stay.
I'm not going to name names.
From win totals to player props, from division races to MVP debates, we've got eyes on every camp and data feeding 24/7, breaking down every angle across the league. Every pick, every edge, every line that matters. SportsGrid. Your road to kickoff starts now.
They're saying that he might be back for the start of the playoffs, but their playoff spot isn't secure with the Mariners bearing down on them and the wild card completely in flux. So this is like borderline red alert because the pitching staff has not been good. We have not seen good stuff from Framber Valdez. So Now that the back end of the bullpen is not good, I don't know what to make.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
Continuing the conversation on the Bowden Blitz ACC edition, we left off talking about a huge game in the conference. Georgia Tech on the road in Boulder to take on Deion Sanders and the Buffaloes. Caden Salter, the former Liberty quarterback, should get the start in that matchup. Coach brought up how Colorado runs the football, 65 rushing yards per game, only 2.4 yards per carry last year. Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter now playing in the NFL, but they could throw the football, 318 yards per game last year. Is that a cause of concern, knowing that you have more of a mobile quarterback than you did with Shedeur? Caden Salter was a 1,000-yard rusher at Liberty, Coach. Do you see that being a different factor or matchup in terms of the game plan?
Well, the key was going to be, is Colorado going to be committed to using the run part of their quarterback, running him effectively, adding the running game? I've just got to ask myself, is it that they just so enamored with throwing the football that they ignore the fact that you've got to be balanced? Because I think that's going to be the key. You got a quarterback that's mobile, a little more of a dual threat. Shedeur was not a scrambler, but he also took a lot of sacks, threw the ball a bunch of times. And I think that's going to take a little bit of a change of philosophy, not just a change of talent. And we'll see that, because what they're going to see on the other side of the ball, they're going to see, Haynes King and Jamal Haynes, the running back, putting that ball on the ground and picking up tough yardage for that Georgia Tech team.
Georgia Tech last year averaged 187 rushing yards per game. They also were very good in terms of passing the football with Haynes King, one of the more precise quarterbacks in the conference. Did battle some injury issues throughout the season, but they made it to a bowl game. They knocked off Florida State in week number 1, challenged the Georgia Bulldogs, and lost that matchup in 8 overtimes, and then lost the bowl matchup to Vanderbilt and Clark Lee. But this is a team, Coach, that played physical against the better teams on their schedule, and I expect them to run the football. Here's the main issue for me, though. Georgia Tech last year struggled on the road or on a neutral field site. They were 2-6 in those type of situations and lost those games by an average margin of defeat of 9.6 points per game. The fact that this game is played in Boulder, I'm inclined to take the points with the Buffaloes.
Well, and I'm not going to. I think it's early in the season. I don't think the weather there is going to be a factor, or the high level of air up in Denver. I still like the fact that Georgia Tech ended the season so strong, and they take that momentum with them into Colorado. Because I think it's going to be at least an 8-win season for Georgia Tech. I see them getting to 8 wins, having an outstanding year. And if things go right, and I think they will win this game, they could see 9 games.
Coach likes Georgia Tech. I like Colorado. We'll see how that game plays out later next week. Another matchup in the conference, Duke takes on Elon. It's a large spread, a large total, but this is a team last year that Manny Diaz led to a 9-4 overall record. Their quarterback, Malik Murphy, did transfer out. He's at Oregon State. They get the Tulane transfer, Darian Mensah, back. When you look at Duke as a whole, Coach, not in terms of just this game against Elon, we know they're potentially going to win just by how much, but can Duke be a contender in the ACC big picture?
I'm going to say this. I think maybe a year or two. I don't think consistently Duke is going to be a contender for the ACC championship. I think some programs don't have that in their makeup, in the depth of the program, the history, the quality of talent they attract. I think Duke right now, they're at the pinnacle of their game. 9 wins last year. Manny Diaz has done a great job. Elko did a great job, and they are at that point where this is, to me, when Duke's having great success, these are the kind of years they have. They may pull a championship. In 1989, Spurrier won the ACC. Before that, it was the 50s and the 60s. It's hard for a team like Duke, where it's academically difficult to get a lot of players in. Not like basketball, where 1 or 2 guys can make you a great team. Academically, you've got to get a lot of players in that also can compete in that classroom. And I think it's always going to be a little bit difficult for a Stanford or a Duke to be a contender for their conference year in and year out. Can Manny Diaz pull it off once every now and then? I think so. But it would be hard to sustain that in a program that has such a difficult time getting a lot of players into school.
The other 2 games of note, East Carolina takes on NC State. That's a rematch of last year's bowl game. How do you see that one playing out, Coach?
No, I think NC State gets all over them. Dave Doran's been there 12 years, 10 bowls, went 6-7 last year, and then he had to go play a cross-state team, East Carolina, and lost to them in the Military Bowl. They've been thinking about East Carolina all offseason.
We'll come back next week on the Bowden Blitz. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Vegas knows how to celebrate. If you're headed to Vegas for your birthday, plan ahead to get all the birthday freebies the city has to offer. Just by showing your ID, you could get free cash play, scratch cards, drinks, and food at various venues on the Strip. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
It should be illegal for Scotty Scheffler to play on the PGA Tour. This guy can't be stopped. Another victory at the BMW Championship. He has a chip on the 17th, which will go down in the history books. 82 feet, landed 60 feet short, and then rolled the rest of the way. Super exciting win again for Scheffler, who is not only the best golfer in the world, he's becoming one of the best golfers of all time.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid.
Passing offense is him, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. They have Jahan Dotson. They just recently traded for John Mechie from the Houston Texans. And obviously, yes, Saquon is there, but a lot of people are expecting the Eagles to have an increase in their passing rate this year. They won't rely as heavily on Saquon, and it should just mean more volume overall. Obviously, Brown was fantastic, and he did so in not playing a full season last year.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
The Giants are probably going to open up 1-5 on the season. So then you start to say the fans are getting angry. They just want to see Dart. The ownership's like, hey, you know what? Maybe we make the right move with Russ here. But then you have self-preservation mode with the general manager and the head coach, where it almost seems like it's inevitable. Midway through the season, it's going to have to be Jackson Dart. Otherwise, what are we doing, Giants?
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome to the Bowden Blitz SEC edition. I'm Joe Lisi, joined by former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bowden. Coach, the AP Top 25 came out throughout the offseason, and the conference has 4 of the top 10 teams there right at the start of the regular season. Can the SEC get back and win a national championship in 2025?
Well, they got more chances because not only do they have 4 in the top 10, they've got 10 in the top 25. Big Ten has 6, and it goes down from there. When you have that many teams sitting around the top 15 to top 20, you got a better chance of getting somebody in. And I think anybody up from Alabama, from Texas to Alabama to Georgia, you can kind of pick them. Then you've got LSU sitting there right on the edge possibility. Even some people are talking Ole Miss, but you got 3 real contenders. I think they've got more than anybody else. So, yes, I do think they can get back in the national championship game. They've got several teams with enough talent, not just to get to the playoffs, but win once they get there.
When you talk about Arch Manning and you talk about hype, it's not just on his Heisman Trophy odds at the start of the year. He's a 7-1 shot to win the hardware, but it's on this team as a whole. And Steve Sarkisian got them to back-to-back college football playoff appearances. But putting them as number 1 overall in the coaches in the AP poll, that's a little bit overhyped, isn't it?
I think people are enamored with this whole Arch Manning at Texas thing. It's such an incredible family of football. You just like people have, I bet Terry Bowden's going to do what Bobby Bowden did. Unfortunately, Terry Bowden couldn't do what Bobby Bowden did. Arch Manning is such a big name. It's got so many people excited. I think he elevates Texas. I think Texas is one of the top 5 teams. I don't think they're favored over Ohio State. I don't think they'll be favored over Georgia. But they think they are one of the top 5 teams. And they do have enough talent. If Arch Manning can just be a great manager, a great leader, he does not have to have the talent of his two uncles or his grandfather. If he just goes out there and manages the football team, they can get to that championship game. But I'm saying is, I think a lot of the hype for Texas is about Arch Manning, because I could see them going 9-3 if things don't fall their way in a couple of tight ball games.
It all starts week number 1 on the road in a rematch with Ohio State. To Coach's point, the Longhorns are 2.5-point road dogs in that matchup. We'll be breaking down that week 1 battle next week on the Bowden Blitz. But you mentioned something. Terry Bowden couldn't do something Bobby Bowden couldn't do. Well, you just got your first national championship, Coach, with Auburn coming out this past week and saying and claiming that they're claiming 4 national championships, and one of them are the 1993 season where you went undefeated. You were on probation that year. But how does it feel, and what are your thoughts about Auburn claiming those 4 national championships?
Well, considering I'm not behind the push, I'm kind of excited about it. You know, back in '91 and before, there were always, quite often, 2 champions. Remember, Colorado, Georgia Tech combined to both be named national champions. And before that, every year they had different services that picked different champions. Now, Auburn's got to live in the same state as Alabama. And Alabama has about 8 national championships back in the day when you had 2 or 3 champions. And Auburn never recognized that. So I'm awful glad they did. But I think my father's rolling over in his grave because, who won the national championship in '93? My old man won the championship. But you know what? We ended up being the only undefeated team. We ended up beating the defending champion Alabama. We were on probation. We couldn't be in the bowl game. And the kids supposedly had nothing to play for. And we went out there and won every single ball game. And so I'm glad they're getting that credit. I think a little bit of that's an Auburn-Alabama thing, but you know what? It's awful nice to see those boys being recognized for having one of the great years in Auburn history.
And the other notable was Jason Campbell, Cadillac Williams, and Ronnie Brown with Tommy Tuberville. He came out as well and said he thought they were one of the best teams and the best team during that season as well. The other news surrounding the SEC is the potential to go to a 9-game conference schedule. What are your thoughts about that? Because, again, I've always said and argued that the SEC doesn't fear anybody. They come right out of the gate. You look at the week 1 matchups this year, Alabama, Florida State. You got LSU and Clemson. Last year, Georgia, Clemson squared off. The Bulldogs squared off a couple of years ago with Oregon. What are your thoughts as a whole about the SEC possibly adapting a 9-game conference schedule?
Well, you know what? I do think the Big Ten and the SEC ought to both do the same thing. And they're not doing the same thing, whether it be 8 or 9 games. I would be very comfortable with them going to 9 games. However, I do like these big marquee games, Ohio State and Texas, games like Clemson and LSU. I don't think we'll have these. If we go to 9, you're going to see less chance of having these top teams from different conferences play each other. So there's some give, there's some take. But I do think whether it be the SEC or the Big Ten, if they agree to 9 out of both of them, ought to play 9 conference games, and then maybe agree to play each other.
The other aspect I wanted to bring up is we saw Kirby Smart in Georgia win back-to-back national championships. The last time the Bulldogs won the hardware was 3 years ago. We saw Michigan and Ohio State, respectively, win national championships over the past couple of years. The Big Ten now is the big dogs on the block. But is it harder in this current landscape for teams to build a potential dynasty, even in the SEC, the way Nick Saban did it for basically 15 years?
I think it's getting harder and harder. The problem is because I know in my last 3 years of coaching, where I just retired after the 23 season, we hit portal transfer and we hit NIL back-to-back. Now, if you build a team, you're going to lose your best players if somebody can outbid you for a football player. It's harder to take your background, your history, your knowledge of how to manage and build a football team and to keep that going. You've got to now change because you're going to lose half your team through attrition that didn't normally come except by graduation or the NFL. So I do think it's harder for a team to go out there and year after year after year be in the championship. But what I do like is there are teams that now can be right back in the championship hunt that have never been there, even if it is because they pay a little bit of money for NIL. They can get players and be in the hunt. We're seeing Oregon's jumped up front. My Ole Miss got right in the hunt. Miami got back in the ball game. All this was done through the NIL and portal transfer.
Well, one of the teams that we're going to talk about when we break down the odds perspective are the Tennessee Volunteers, a 10-win football team, lost to the Ohio State Buckeyes in the first round of the college football playoff. Their quarterback, Nico, is now the starting quarterback potentially at UCLA. They get in the transfer, Joey Aguilar from App State. How hard is it for a transfer to basically hit the ground running in a potentially new scheme?
He's got to have the right kind of talent. Now, I've studied Tennessee. Their quarterback, I coached against him when he was at App State. I coached against him when I was at ULM. He's a very talented quarterback. But for Tennessee to have the right quarterback, he must be extremely accurate on the deep ball. They haven't had that since 2022. He's got to be extremely accurate on the deep ball. They haven't had that perfectly with Nico last year. Or we'll have to see how that goes this year. But that's very important for a quarterback to hit the ground running. He's got to have that instinct for throwing a great deep ball.
You talk about Tennessee right now. Their win total is 8.5. They do have plus money to the over at plus 118. We'll also talk about some other teams. Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, huge expectations. They had everything for the taking last year with Jackson Dart. They walked into the swamp, and Jackson Dart had one of his worst performances all of last season, throwing 2 critical interceptions, getting outplayed by DJ Lagway. Austin Simmons now comes with a lot of hype. This team has an 8.5 win total. Can Ole Miss be that team potentially in the conference? We'll come back and we'll break down those odds now on the Bowden Blitz. Joe Lisi, Coach Bowden, breaking down conference odds and, more importantly, the big game on tap later in the week, Auburn, Baylor. Can Auburn make a statement in Waco? We're coming right back on the Bowden Blitz. Keep it where it is.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
It doesn't matter that they're early in the game, late in the game, they're trailing, they're leading. It doesn't matter garbage time. CeeDee Lamb is the guy, and we saw that even after Dak got hurt last year and Cooper Rush was under center. Targets were going to CeeDee Lamb. And when you can get 9, 10, 12, 15 targets on a game-by-game basis, he's going to rack up fantasy points every single week. Frankly, he underperformed last year.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Answer is this. 12-team, 3 wide receiver, you take Jamar Chase. In a 10-team league, though, where you have only 2 wide receivers to start, it's an interesting supply and demand situation with a roster like that. That is where the Bijan number 1 overall maybe comes into play, because you could take Bijan and then turn around. You're still getting 2 number 1 wide receivers in a 10-team league draft.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
In extras, knocked out the Reds 6-5. This team doesn't lose. And the only thing I want to say, Tom, is I just hope they can continue this. Now, what does that mean? 40 games in a row? Of course we know it's not going to be the case. They are peaking right now. We've seen so many times. Baseball's a long season. Boy, if the Brewers are playing this baseball on September the 28th, watch out. But they are sensational right now.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
All right, back on the Bowden Blitz. Joe Lisi, Coach Bowden, breaking down SEC odds. We talked about the Tennessee Volunteers and Josh Heupel, 8.5 win total. This was a team that was a 10-win program last year, made it to the college football playoff, but couldn't run the football consistently, and they lost in dominating fashion to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Coach, this team last year was 7-0 at home, and they won against FBS opponents by an average margin of victory of 28.1 points per game. But starting quarterback Nico is gone. Dylan Sampson is gone. How important is the rushing attack for the success of Joey Aguilar in that offense this year?
Yeah, it's always important when you bring a new quarterback in. And again, in an offense where he has to be able to throw the ball accurately for them to be successful, that happens by having a good running game to run with their offense. And I think that's so important. I've said that several times already, that the great quarterback needs a running game to complement his throwing because it puts him in better situations. You get a team that does not run the ball well, they get down the second half, quarterback presses, second half interceptions. Throwing a lot of third and longs as opposed to third and short and third and mediums, that's a problem for the quarterback. So Tennessee, again, they've got to continue to run that football. But I will say this again. If they want to get back to the incredible offense that Josh Heupel had in 2022, they've got to be able to run the ball and hit the deep ball. Run the ball and hit the deep ball. And what happens, those quarterbacks come in and they overthrow so many open receivers, it changes the effect of that offense. If you remember back in 22, the deep ball was incredible, and yet they've had a hard time getting quarterbacks that consistently hit it that goes with their offense.
I agree. And I think when you look at this team overall, I think they're slightly up against it. They could potentially, if they overexceed expectations, get to 9 wins, but I think they're more in the area of 8-4 overall. Yeah. We'll see how it plays out in Knoxville. They do have a very difficult, in my opinion, road schedule. So we'll see if the Volunteers can live up to expectations in 2025. I mentioned Lane Kiffin. I really thought they were the team to potentially be that dark horse like Tennessee last year. I thought they had everything for the taking, and then the road performances by Jackson Dart were just not up to par. Now they get Austin Simmons. They come now with an 8.5 win total. Lane Kiffin has done a fantastic job, but you lose Trey Harris, you lose Ulysses Bentley, their starting running back, and Walter Nolan on the defensive side of the ball. Lane Kiffin built up the defense last year, one of the best rush defenses in all of college football, allowing only 80 rushing yards per game. Can Ole Miss potentially get to a 10-win season this year?
Yeah, I think they can. I think Ole Miss, they underachieved last year. I think of all the teams in college football, they underachieved. Look at them. They had a first-round draft pick at quarterback. They had incredible defense. I went to the Georgia-Ole Miss game in Oxford. It was clear Ole Miss had the better athletes on the team. And when you've got better athletes in Georgia, you need to be playing for the national championship. Now, the thing that Lane Kiffin does, he does a great job in the portal. Maybe one of the best coaches in the country for going through and recruiting the portal. He's loaded again, and he's got an exciting quarterback. And you've got kind of the monkey off his back. You don't have everybody talking about Ole Miss this year. I think this is a great year. If you had to pick a dark horse, not just in the SEC, but maybe to make a run during the college football playoffs, it might just need to be Ole Miss.
How hard is it to coach JUCO and transfer talent? Maybe when it's 1 or 2 players, but let's say it's more than that. Let's say it's like 5 to 7 or 8 to 10 on a starting unit, offensively and defensively. For those players to gel cohesively, is that a harder fix as a head coach potentially, or is it just all systems go because they're young players and they can adapt?
Well, you know what? It's changed so much. College football has changed. I was a head coach starting in 1983. And for the first 30 years, it was like a no-no to get too many JC transfers, because you weren't developing them. They didn't learn the system, and you could get too many. But with the inclusion of the portal transfer and NILs, your roster changes every year. What's happened, the great teams learn to keep it simple, stupid. They keep a basic defensive scheme in, a basic offensive scheme, So you can plug in different people, and they won't have to learn so much. They won't have to matriculate or learn the system as they go. They can jump right in and be effective that way. So that's just the way it is now. Wasn't like that when I did most of my coaching. You had to build your football team. You had to develop your quarterback. If you do that now, you're probably developing half of them for somebody else.
A quarterback that I'm very high on, but the team doesn't have high expectations, is Sam Pittman and Arkansas. They have a 5.5 win total this year. They got to a bowl game. They stepped up and dominated Texas Tech. But when you look at this team as a whole, Taylon Green is an under-the-radar guy. He could take games over with his arm, with his legs. They do have sophomore running back Braylon Russell returning, and they're very physical on the offensive line. Depth could be an issue defensively, but I think this team has the potential to be an 8 or a 9-win football team this year.
Yeah, it's funny. We look at the SEC, and we talk each time we get to a team, we talk about how strong they are. But their best bet might be 6 or 7 wins. There's just a lot of teams that even if they play very good, you might just see 7. Now, you said 8 or 9, but the likelihood may be just 7, maybe even 6, a bowl season. But I'm not sure Sam Pittman can save his job winning 6, maybe 7, probably needs 8.
If he does lose his job, I've heard, potential big-name coaches. Could they get a coach like John Gruden that goes from the NFL ranks, is now basically in broadcasting, to come back to at least rejuvenate the program?
Well, John Gruden's let it know that he would love to coach in the SEC. So I think there's a few teams out there, because he's such a young coach and a young-looking coach with energetic. His whole personality and style fits the SEC, fits that energy and that excitement. I could see him doing a very good job with an SEC team. I'm a Sam Pittman fan. I hope he pulls it off and stays at Arkansas and does well. But John Gruden, he's going to end up somewhere. If he had his way, it would be in the SEC.
The one thing that Arkansas does is they cover the spread as it relates to the sports wagering perspective. Sam Pittman and the Arkansas Razorbacks are an underdog, or almost a lock at times, to cover that number. We'll come back with the big game in the conference, Auburn-Baylor, coming up next.
Playing online blackjack and want to try upping your odds? Well, here's a tip. Cheat cards tell you statistics for whether you hit or stand on every move. If you're into stats, this could be your ticket to winning. And it is totally legal. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
The Bengals are listening to trade offers for perennial Pro Bowler Trey Hendrickson per me and Tom Pelissero. It's unclear if the NFL sack leader will be playing elsewhere in 2025, and a trade will be a real challenge, but time will tell. You know, it's not a real challenge in the offseason when he doesn't want to be here and you're trying to make a trade for him. Most people that say, okay, I have to sell a house or sell a car, let me put it out on the market, and I'll take the best deal that's available.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid. This is the moment every fan waits for. The countdown's over. The road to kickoff has begun.
Play is here to stay.
I'm not going to name names.
From win totals to player props, from division races to MVP debates, we've got eyes on every camp and data feeding 24/7, breaking down every angle across the league. Every pick, every edge, every line that matters. SportsGrid. Your road to kickoff starts now.
They're saying that he might be back for the start of the playoffs, but their playoff spot isn't secure with the Mariners bearing down on them and the wild card completely in flux. So this is like borderline red alert because the pitching staff has not been good. We have not seen good stuff from Framber Valdez. So now that the back end of the bullpen is not good, I don't know what to make of it.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
There's a battle brewing in Waco, Texas next week. It's Auburn on the road, a 2.5-point road favorite against the Baylor Bears. Baylor started last year, coach, 2-4, but they ripped off 6 straight wins, winning by an average margin of victory of 14.8 points per game before they lost in the bowl matchup to LSU 44-31. I know everybody looking at Auburn and Hugh Freeze to step up and make a statement. I actually think Baylor could strike the upset as a home dog later next week.
They definitely can do it. I think Auburn's going to kind of pull it together. Hugh Freeze gotten back to the wall. 2 losing seasons. Auburn's had 4 straight losing seasons. Haven't gone to 5 straight since World War II. This whole offseason was not focused on the SEC. It was focused on Baylor. Because what you got Ball State, you got South Alabama. You could be 3-0, which is what you've got to be going into Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Georgia after that. So this is a critical game for Auburn, and I think they prepared a lot of the offseason for what they've got to do against Baylor.
You and I talked earlier in the episode on the breakdown when we broke down the SEC about how he deviated from his former offensive philosophy with Malik Willis and Caden Salter. The other factor as well, when you just look at the offense and team as a whole, very undisciplined, coach. They were -9 in turnover margin.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people and pundits will say, well, that can't be coached up. That's basically just the bounce of the ball. That's not true. Good coaches basically coach ball security. And when you're not winning the turnover battle offensively, defensively, each and every week, that's a problem.
You're going to lose. You're not going to win ball games. But let me say this. It is coaching. If you look at caused fumbles, coaching causes fumble. How to strip the ball, how to put your helmet on the ball. Causing a fumble is coached. Recovering a fumble sometimes is luck. The ball bounces a funny way. But when you watch how many fumbles are caused, you can coach that. And if you cause more, you're going to get more. And obviously, if you learn to play defensive back with your eyes to the ball, a little more zone, maybe a little less man where you can get your eyes on the ball, you can mix it up well, disguise the quarterback. You've got to create those turnovers because turnovers end up being huge in a tight season. That was as big a reason they lost last year as anything. The second thing, or maybe the first thing tied, is the play of the quarterback was not good last year. Jackson Arnold is a gamble that he took that this one better succeed.
And Jackson Arnold, if you watch the big matchups last year against Tennessee, he got pulled for Michael Hawkins in the second half. He stepped up against Ole Miss. The team was within striking distance. They were down by 12 points. He couldn't lead his team in the second half to points in that matchup. He is going to be learning a new scheme, and that is basically a lot of pressure on him and Ashton Daniels, the former Stanford quarterback. We heard Hugh Freeze come out and say he's potentially going to utilize 3 quarterbacks in this matchup. That's a lot of pressure for each and every one, isn't it, Coach? And when you look at the flip side for Baylor, Sawyer Robertson is a really experienced quarterback, 28 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions. This is a team that averaged 261 passing yards per game. You would have to give the offensive edge to the more experienced quarterback in Baylor, wouldn't you?
I think you would, but again, overall picture, Jackson Arnold, was he the problem or was the offensive scheme at Oklahoma the problem? Anytime a head coach takes over like Brent Venables and he's a defensive coach, you've got to hope he can hire the right coordinator, and now he's gone through his coordinators. I got to hope that what you've got to hope is Jackson Arnold is in a system where he could be successful. Can we tell you, with Cam Coleman and Singleton at wide receiver, he's got a good receivers as anybody. Auburn's talent level better than Baylor. Baylor's quarterback situation more stable.
How important is home field for Baylor in this matchup? Auburn going into Big 12 country in this battle. Do you see that being a factor at all?
I don't know. I've called ball games at Baylor. I've called games as an announcer, but I haven't coached in that stadium. I just don't think of that as one of the stadiums around the country that intimidates people. I think so. Usually if you go to a stadium, you hear about the ones that are very intimidating. So I'm not sure that's going to be a factor. Anybody that coaches in the SEC, every week you go to stadiums that are as dynamic and as tough to win as anywhere in the country.
Look for Baylor to potentially run the football. Dawson Pendergrass is out one of their running backs from last year. It'll be Bryson Washington with a bulk of the carries. They average 178 rushing yards per game. I like Baylor to win the game outright. Coach, you lean into Auburn in that matchup?
Yeah, I am leaning to Auburn just because, like I say, Hugh Freeze has got a proven record everywhere he's been, from Lambeth College to Ole Miss to Liberty. He has won. I think he digs deep and finds a way to get Auburn back on track.
We'll see you next week on the Bowden Blitz.